Youth participation in politics has always been a contested terrain. Young people have been demanding an opportunity to contribute to decision-making processes that not only affect their lives, but also the nation at large. Are they being heard? Are they being given a chance to take their seat at the main table? And of course, is this making any impact? To talk to us about this, we're joined now in studio by Liza Mfana. He's the Deputy President of the EFF Student Command, political Quickie founder, Mapaseka Moroua, as well as Yolanda Khonziwe from the #TotalShutdown Movement. To all three of you, a very warm welcome to Newsroom Africa. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And they said young people December all the way through January. Look at us. Here we are, alive with possibilities. Let me start with you, Yolanda, and I guess generally get a sense of whether or not you believe that young people have, in fact, reclaimed their agency. I think it's been a widespread perception that young people are pretty much apathetic, don't really know what's going on. But the last couple of months, if not years, particularly in this country, suggests something completely different.
Absolutely. I think we have to recognize that we live in a digital era where we've seen technologies and internet totally radicalize public spheres. And we've seen how young people have used social media as tools, not only to eradicate for change, but to be part of the decision-making processes in politics. So I would say that they have taken the initiative. I don't know if leaders have met them halfway yet. I don't think that's the case. I just think that young people are creatively bringing innovative ideas to be part of the conversation and to bring about change.
Liza, would you agree with that sentiment? I mean, the idea that leaders are not taking young people seriously. We know the CIC has been quite, I don't know, call it harsh with his perceptions of how the Student Command in particular is performing. Are you getting a sense that you're being heard by even your own political figureheads?
I would necessarily not say that political leaders or even civil leaders don't take young people seriously. From my perspective, I think it's more of a systematic issue that has actually created a generational divide that continues to maintain itself and actually reproduce itself with the years. So it's difficult. We have to put in the systems in place first before we can actually really make any real impact as young people.
What do you mean by systematic issues?
By systematic issues, my brother, I mean legislation, for example, is developed in Parliament. And if you check structures like Parliament, you check the courts and all of these things, they require a certain level of experience, which is what they call it. But we know from our side is ageism, because sometimes you can actually have the experience on a particular issue of a 30-year-old while you're still 16. But there's actually no systems in place to empower young people who actually have the knowledge, who have the expertise, because they are not experienced. They are still high school students. They are still university students. So I think the system in its entirety and how it structures actually contributes a lot to the generational divide that exists.
And I guess, Mapaseka, that sort of opens the window to begin organizations like Political Quickie, right? Platforms that I guess are able to bridge whatever systematic obstacles exist. Tell us about this platform and how it contributes to empowering young people, as Liza says, they're not empowered.
Well, Political Quickie is a YouTube show or channel that discusses politics subjectively. This is my opinion and the opinions of the people around me. So in terms of bridging the gap, it's understanding that globalization has given us a very powerful tool to be able to reach people beyond our borders, to reach people in Parliament, as well as to collaborate with other young people. So this is what it is. You see it on Twitter, on YouTube, etc. And it's been able to put me right here and to be able to speak to others who are very prominent and powerful. But I think at the end of the day, the bottom line is about collaboration and understanding that the tool that globalization has given us is that in the bigger, grander scheme of things, understanding that Africa as a continent must come together, and that's been the core of Political Quickie, to try and get that collaboration, not just young people in South Africa, but young people on the continent and Africans in the diaspora as well.
And I guess that mobilization has taken form in some way or another. In other African countries too, we've seen in Libya, young people getting together in ways that we hadn't imagined. Sudan, very similar seeds, So I guess it appears to be a reawakening, because young people being at the forefront is actually nothing new. Historically, we've done it before. Why do you think there's sparked this renewed, call it, coming into oneself insofar as young people and their activism is concerned?
I think that for a long time, young people had been in a banner, sitting at the back and not being actively involved. But the moment social media came about and they were able to recognize their agency and use their voices to find the solutions in society. And the most brilliant thing about it is that now we are able to hold leadership accountable through social media, which is such a very powerful tool that we need to be utilizing as young people. And so I think that social media versus the spark, they're seeing that there are issues that directly affect young people, such as when they were the Fees Must Fall activists, because education is important and they were fighting for that. So I think that all of that sparked.
Liza, Yolanda speaks about Fees Must Fall, and I guess that immediately sparks the Roads Must Fall movement and the many other must fall movements that were spearheaded by young people. During that period, one of the buzzwords that were used was that of intersectionality, right? The acknowledgement of multiple intersections insofar as people's identities are concerned. And over time, as people come to grips with that, there'd been concerns raised about whether or not young people's understanding of identity politics moves us forward or is in fact an impediment. What's your view on that? Do you think we've got it figured out, or is there still a lot of work that needs to be done?
No, look, my brother, in as far as intersectionality politics are concerned, it's a very broad type of topic, and it would be reckless and irresponsible to actually assert that young people have arrived. Because, for example, I will sit here today and make a statement on national television that there is no such thing as a gender binary, for example. There's a gender spectrum. Someone sitting at home will look at me like, hey, my brother, you are crazy. You know. So I think in answering your question, we still have a long, very, very long way to go in terms of those particular politics. But I think there are strides that have been made in terms of teaching young people around identity politics and the importance of identity politics, especially as it relates to the prioritization of each individual's agency. Because all these movements, Fees Must Fall, Roads Must Fall, they all, to some level or another, spoke to the ability of young people to make their own decisions. And I think that if we were to actually understand identity politics from that perspective, to say that whatever you decide with your sexuality, whatever you decide with your race, is actually not my business. It is not my, terrain to actually have a view. I cannot necessarily have a view on what kind of sexuality you choose to uphold. So I think that is the fundamental principle that is kind of lacking in our advancement of intersectional politics, to say it is not necessarily about you, but about the other person.
And how do we make sure that there's at least some, call it, universal understanding of the principle that Uliza is pointing out? I mean, I imagine dialogue is obviously one way to do that, but the fact that we can sit together at a table doesn't mean that we'll always be able to reach a conclusion. How do we work towards that?
I think one of the most important things would be inspiring young people. I was having this conversation with my mom the other day, about how I feel like we're not inspired to get behind the NDP. We're not inspired to get behind the vision of South Africa, whatever it is. And so I would love to see a marketing of South Africa. I want to live, breathe, eat the vision of South Africa so I can get in with it and be one with it. So the dialogues are important, but I need to see everywhere I go on television, the president once a week telling us this is the NDP and this is the vision. I need to see billboards, etc. Yes, shows like mine, Political Quickie, do try to do that, but I think at the end of the day, there needs to be mass marketing of where South Africa is, our politics as young people, and how we need to get involved.
Mapaseka speaks about taking pride in the country. Do young people have any reason to do that at the moment, given our unemployment rates, given the crimes, given everything else? And I don't mean to be cynical, but realistically speaking, if we want young people to be inspired in the country, are we giving them reasons to do that?
Currently, no, we are not. And I think that we cannot be relying on current leadership for inspiration. Young people need to come onto the table and bring inspiration, because they are creative. They have creative ways in which they are transforming society. So they need to come into the table and then start having these conversations. And these conversations did not only happen in social media spaces, they need to be part of the conversations in politics, in government, so that they can be not just be placed in ceremonial placements, but also be part of the decision-making processes.
Liza, the mode of activism that young people have taken on is, in some corners, considered to be quite a militaristic type of activism, you know. To harp on what the student commands, I guess, even visually what they look like. There's a red beret, there's a perception that, you know, there's a strong military presence in the ways through which we go about making our points. Is that the best way to go about things?
As things currently stand, my brother, I would say it is, because you just run a thorough or a brief analysis of the past decade, and you check the achievements that young people have actually forced the government to implement. Have they been implemented through dialogue or through militants? And then I think the answer to that question will be the answer to your question, to say that dialogue is important, yes. Going through the processes is important. Writing to legislator, writing to parliament, and all of these different writings that must be done are important. But at the end of the day, there has to be pressure that is applied, my brother. At any material position, the young people have to apply pressure to get things done. It's an unfortunate reality of this country, but that is the reality that we're facing. And I think that without the militancy, we really wouldn't have come as far as we have as young people. We wouldn't have achieved half the things that we have achieved. So I think, yeah, to answer your question directly, militancy, radicalism is actually very necessary.
I guess then the question becomes whether or not there's been an appreciation of the cost of that militancy. And we'll talk about that when we come back from this quick ad break. I'm in discussion with Liza Mfana, Mapaseka Moroua, as well as Yolanda Khonziwe, as we make sense of the contribution that young people have made to keeping South Africa where it is and moving it to where it hopes